just talk about their typical, like you've seen them all in Kristen's presentations, are land and labor acknowledgement, and then sort of a graphic of the elements of ACE.
Thank you.
And then when we start, I'm going to invite each of you to introduce yourselves and talk about your work and how it aligns with ACE, how you're leveraging those ACE principles. So we'll go down the line. I might kind of follow up. I've not had enough caffeine to think clearly, so we'll see. And then I'm going to ask you to each share a story of a time when you felt like you've been successful in something at work, or you moved the needle, and a barrier that you wish could be eliminated that would allow you to be more successful in your work. And feel free to ask each other questions, or we'll make it more of a dialogue. I was like, we should do a fishbowl instead of a panel, right? Oh, you've never done fishbowl?
I have done a fishbowl, yes.
Fishbowl, you put people in a circle and they have like a conversation instead of answering questions like on a panel, and they kind of go back and forth and can riff off of each other, and then the outer circle just has to listen, but sometimes they can tap in if they want to participate in the conversation. It's just much more egalitarian.
Like tapping a fishbowl.
Yeah.
You can say whatever you want.
Yeah.
Live stream is no.
Oh, it's fun.
It is. Oh, okay. Are you going to introduce us, or we're just going to go?
Introduce yourself.
Well, good morning, everyone. Happy Monday. Please bear with us. We're still suffering from jet lag. My name is Susan Phillips. I am the executive director of Climate Generation, which is an organization that works nationally but is based in the Twin Cities in Minnesota. And so we are here to talk about utilizing action for climate empowerment, ACE, to ignite and sustain climate action. We at Climate Generation have a practice that before we get rolling in any of our presentations, we like to do a land acknowledgement. In Minnesota, we live and work and play on Dakota territory and Anishinaabe land. And so we encourage everyone, wherever they are, to reflect upon the historical legacies of the land that they occupy. Additionally, in the United States, we like to acknowledge the labor of the stolen labor and life and humanity of enslaved Africans on our continents and their descendants, who are the actual builders of the foundations of the United States. So we also offer that acknowledgement of labor. And we are super excited to have with us today Stephanie Heckman, visual artist and graphic recorder extraordinaire. Stephanie is with an organization called Drossum. Did I pronounce that right, Stephanie? And she and another team of graphic illustrators have been scribes for a day for us this past week and into this week, and she is going to do a graphic recording of our conversation this morning. The image on the slide is the graphic recording that she did for us at the start of COP, which is a beautiful illustration of ACE principles. So a little bit about Climate Generation. We exist to ignite and sustain the ability of educators, youth, and communities to act on the systems perpetuating the climate crisis. We work to overcome disinformation. We center anti-racism and systemic equity in our work, and we believe in personalizing and localizing climate change action. So just as a quick review, the ACE, Action for Climate Empowerment principles, are education, training, coordination of networks, accelerating just climate action, building public awareness and public participation, and access to information for folks in the world. And this is the esteemed panel today. And so I am just going to invite Barbara, Javen, and Diamond to introduce themselves and talk a little bit about their organizations and their work and how they are leveraging the elements of ACE to make change in their communities.
All right, hopefully y'all can hear me okay. My name is Diamond Spratling, and I am the founder of Girl Plus Environment. I am originally from Detroit, Michigan, but I currently live in Atlanta on the Muskogee Creek land. Girl Plus Environment is a 501c3 national nonprofit that was created to educate, engage, and empower Black and brown girls, women, and non-binary individuals to stand up for environmental justice in their own neighborhoods, especially just recognizing and understanding that, unfortunately, many Black and brown communities are disproportionately impacted by climate, by environmental justice, by environmental issues in general. And so it's really critical that we are first educated on all the issues that impact us the most, but also that we are placed in a position where we can feel empowered to actually do something about it in our own neighborhoods. So I'm super excited to be here today, and it's so great to have y'all.
Hi, my name is Barbara Martinez Guerrero, and I am from Miami, Florida. I'm first generation. My parents came to the U.S. In '86, and I'm really happy for the experiences that I've had in Miami. Miami is very unique, if anybody's gone there. We are definitely a melting pot. And so what I do there is I'm the executive director of Dream and Green, which is a nonprofit that focuses on environmental education. And our mission is really to empower individuals to take action to solve climate issues. So, this idea of being here and taking this all in is definitely going to go back with me and shared out. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later.
All right, half a day. Hello, everybody. My name is Javen Santos, and I am the policy manager for the Climate Initiative. So my work started back in Guam, where I am from, and built up to working with the Climate Initiative, a U.S. national organization. I started by creating some policy workshops to help train youth in Guam on how they can use climate policy, how they can use policy as a climate solution, teaching young people about the legislative process, teaching young people about what are some of the challenges of policy in Guam, and now I'm able to work with the Climate Initiative to build up national youth and provide youth across the country in the U.S. with resources, workshops, and trainings to empower youth voices to use policy as a part of their climate solutions. A lot of the youth that we've worked with have gone on to either working in national climate policy spaces. Some of them participated in the Conference of Youth here in Egypt today, or that was earlier before the COP, and many of them have gone on to do local climate policy advocacy in their communities. So that's a little bit about me, and I'm excited to talk with you all.
Awesome. Thank you. So let's go back through and let's dive a little bit deeper into the principles of ACE and tell us a little bit how your organization is building awareness, empowering people, helping them, learn and take action and change things in their own communities.
Yeah, I'm happy to kick us off with that question. So like I said, Girl Plus Environment does a lot of education, engagement, and empowerment. And our biggest thing that we believe is we don't know what we don't know, and that's very, very true, especially in Black and brown communities. And we don't always have the privilege to say, for example, not in my backyard. I mean, that was a huge thing, NIMBY, many years ago, when a lot of white communities were able to say, well, we don't want our areas to be polluted, we don't want air pollution, we don't want water pollution. But unfortunately, in a lot of Black and brown communities, we don't even know what's going on in our own backyards. And so before we can ask people to stand up for things such as climate justice, such as environmental justice, we have to know what's going on in our own backyards, and we have to be educated, but we have to be very strategic in that education. So one of the things that Girl Plus Environment does, and we think we do really well, is engaging people, especially through social media. So we're really big on making sure that we are utilizing trends, utilizing digital media to really spread the word about what environmental justice is, what climate justice is, but especially how it impacts and how it relates to so many other issues, because we always tell people, because a lot of people say, well, I don't think climate has anything to do with me, or like, how can I focus on environment when I'm just trying to put food on the table? But many people don't understand that the food on your table has everything to do with climate justice, as it does racial justice, health equity, gentrification, and so many more. I mean, even housing, and think of things such as high utility bills, because that's something that's so present in our communities that it's really hard to make that connection. And so we try to do a really great job at making sure that people understand what those interconnections and interrelationships are of climate justice, of climate change, so that we can and then actually turn that around to empowerment, so that people feel like they are comfortable and feel like they have the resources and tools to stand up for themselves and to stand up for other communities alike.
Yeah, I think I can relate to a lot of the statements that you meant about getting people more aware of the way that climate affects our communities. You know, coming from a Pacific island, seeing the front lines of sea level rise, global temperatures causing coral bleaching, which impacts how my people back home are able to feed themselves. And I think that in my role back in Guam, when I was doing workshops for young people in the Pacific, I think education, I think in terms of the elements of ACE, education was like the big component that we were doing, teaching young people about where they fit into the climate space and moving that into public participation through the policy realm. And that's something that I've been really excited to do with the organization, with the Climate Initiative on a national level, because having young people participate in some of our programming, a lot of the work that my organization does is teaching young people in the classroom, having teachers use our organization's educational curriculum that includes climate action projects for young people to take. Some of the youth that have been in our programming are some of the youth in our program are currently building living shorelines out in Maine, and I think that with my work in particular in policy, public participation by showing youth, by providing internships to young people that allow them to research about their climate policy landscape in their communities, and having them more engaged and doing research on what they wish to improve, as well as providing resources for young people by their communities for their communities, I think has been one of the ways that my organization, the work that I have done, heavily connected with ACE.
So I can relate. Living in Miami, we are ground zero, some people say, for climate change, especially sea level rise. And so there's no more denying that climate change is happening. We see it, we live it. We're experiencing changes even within 5 years. We're all talking about, Miami Beach, place everybody loves to come. Where is it going to be in 2100? So our students that we work with are very engaged, and they're very much aware that this is happening. And so our program works, we have two programs, but our schools program is called Green Schools Challenge. And we directly take what is happening locally, both at the local level, like city and county level, but also at the state level. And we look at those issues and bring it into the classroom. And so we create curriculum for pre-K through 12th grade that helps teachers integrate things like sea level rise issues, talk about extreme heat. Miami has a big problem with extreme heat. It's causing all kinds of health issues. We also have something you mentioned about energy burdens. Because we have such extreme heat, we have a lot of people that can't afford air conditioners, and we have a lot of people that have to make that choice between paying their electric bill or paying for medicine. And so those choices are hitting people's pockets, and so it's affecting us in every single way possible. And so our organization definitely tries to make sure that teachers feel empowered to teach about these topics, and that their students are also able to look at what's happening locally. A lot of the times when we talk about climate change, a couple of years ago, we were talking about the panda bears. Everybody loved to show those little pandas. I didn't know the pandas and the polar bears and all of these animals that, are not in Miami. So then we switched in Miami to the turtles, and everybody was like, you can't have straws because of the turtles. And then all of a sudden that changed, because now it's something that they can relate to. They can relate to the pandas, they can relate to the polar bears, but they can relate to the turtles. And so, now cities in Miami-Dade County have blocked, straws. Now we have paper straws. So it's a small win. But it came, I think, from the youth, from youth pushing, from youth being invested, from youth being knowledgeable, and pushing the issue, going to commission meetings, talking to mayors, and being like, this is a solution that we can do right now. So I think that's a big part of ACE education, engagement, and then trying to find a solution. You can't change everything all at once, but starting with small increments, I feel like that does a lot to move the needle forward.
I really love that, get the low-hanging fruit and make small increments, because I think that we often in this movement can be kind of depressing, right? I mean, the crisis is huge, and it often feels like on a global scale that we will never be able to move the needle. I know my 22-year-old son looks at everything on a global scale, and I'm like, we cannot impact the globe, but we can our block and our neighborhood and our city. And so I really appreciate what you're saying, Barbara, about that hyper-locality of our actions so that we find success and can feel joy and build solidarity in our movements. And so on that note, I would love it if each of you could share a success story, something that happened in your organization, in your community, some kind of a win, some opportunity you had to dance in the streets and be happy and get that boost you need to keep going. We're in this for the marathon, right? It's not a sprint.
Yeah, I can start. I have two success stories that I'd like to share. One that was in my community back in Guam, and one with the work that I've been doing with the Climate Initiative. So a little bit about my background. I started working in policy in high school. I was lucky enough to come up in a program that was directly linked to our state legislature in Guam, and where young people can actually learn the process to draft policy and submit it to legislators for them to pass into law. So I think for me, one of the personal accomplishments, and it's very similar to what you were saying, Barbara, was I was able to push for the passage of a plastic bag ban into law, legislation that I drafted, to be passed into law for the entire island. It was signed into law in a Republican governor administration, so it was a really cool accomplishment. And I agree with you in the same that it's not that it's a small win, but I think it helped people recognize the issue of how the environment shapes our daily lives. Coming from the Pacific, where sea turtles are endangered, and the way that plastic bags influence the sea life, which is a source of food for my communities. I think having that passed into law helped a lot of people realize the importance of environmental law, because I think coming from Guam, a lot of people are just trying to live day by day. So having people realize that environmental policy affects their day by day was something that I think that policy was able to start conversations towards. And for work with my organization hosted its first ever Collegiate Climate Policy Institute. It was a 3-day workshop where we brought youth around the country to virtually participate in trainings on climate policy, and ultimately allow them to meet with congressional offices that they were constituents of, and they got to talk about the climate issues that matter to them and what they hope to see from these congressional offices. And I think that the young people that participated really enjoyed that training, really enjoyed that opportunity, and a lot of those young people ended up moving on to participating in the programs that I was mentioning, like advocating for policies in their local community, participating in the US's, in organizing the first climate conference of youth in the US. And so I think that program was really successful for us in helping young people realize the power that policy can have for climate solutions, and we're planning on re-implementing it again the next year. So we're looking for more youth to participate in March of 2023. So be looking out for that.
So a win for our organization, I'll do two wins, a personal organizational win and a regional win. A personal organization win is that our programs this year have reached 135 schools. We work in, thank you, in the fourth largest school district in the U.S., fourth and sixth, because we've gone now to Broward County. And so not only does that show a need, but an engagement by the teachers and students to bring this type of, curriculum into their classroom. So that to us has been great to see so many teachers and students involved. And a regional win, the county, Miami-Dade County, just passed a new initiative called Plastic Free 305. And so they're pushing businesses to get rid of single-use plastics, and they're giving them, they're working on an incentive base, not, punishment. And so this program just started. It was done through a partnership with Ocean Conservancy, which is one of our biggest partners. And so that was a big win for us in Miami-Dade County. And it's moving, we feel like it's moving up north. So hopefully Florida, I know Florida, when we talk about Florida, that's another conversation. But, hopefully Florida will become plastic-free soon. And that would be an amazing win.
Fingers crossed on that one. And actually, one other win, I think Miami hired your first chief heat officer, too, a couple months ago, which I think was just absolutely amazing, and I think serves as like a leader for other cities to do the same thing. So I love that for y'all.
Yeah, she was actually she was one of the first executive directors of our Dream and Green. So
I love that. Oh my gosh, that's even better.
So another win. Woohoo!
Yes, more wins. So I guess one of the wins I want to talk about with Girl Plus Environment, so we're still a relatively very, very new, very small organization that I started just 3 years ago, if even. But one of the things that a lot of people don't know, but in the state of Georgia, there is a proposal for our utility company to increase our utility bills by $200 a year. And that is an extra 12%. So whatever your utility bill is currently, they are proposing to increase it by $200, which that's absolutely outrageous. And if you live in Georgia, if you know anything about just the economy in Georgia and housing and utility bills, people are already paying a significant, overwhelming amount for their bills, which we think is absolutely not fair. And unfortunately, just like any other climate and environmental issues, Black and brown communities are the ones who are suffering the most. And so what Girl Plus Environment did was we put together a cohort of 25 Black and brown women in Atlanta to get engaged in that proposal and to stop the increase. And so basically we started a program called Protecting Our Energy Project. We had a cohort of 25 Black and brown women who received stipends to help with their utility bills during the participation. It was 3 months, and basically we brought in other amazing people of color to talk about what exactly energy burden is, what is utility burden, what it has to do with our health, how are we disproportionately impacted, but also what can we do, because knowing about the issue is one thing, but knowing what to do is another, and even more critical, because we can't just sit on information like that. We can't gatekeep. And so it was really critical for us to actually have an action that followed up with that. And so we had different workshop sessions where we were able to educate our community about energy justice, about the rate case in Georgia, energy policy specifically, because ultimately this is a proposal that can go into effect as early as January 1st. And so people seeing that switch that soon is absolutely outrageous. And so what we also did as far as the action piece is a lot of our cohort participants submitted public comments. So their action was to actually talk to the Public Service Commission of Georgia and tell them that a $200 increase was absolutely outrageous, and talking to them about what this actually does for them, for their family, for their households. And so we were able to submit public comment online. People went into the public service committees, to the public hearings, and actually talked about utility bills and what impact that would have on their community. And so that was a really, really critical piece for us. Granted, that work is not done. We're still waiting to hear back of what the Public Service Commission will do, but we feel very, very confident. We're very happy that we were at least able to provide a space of Black and brown women who can talk about those issues and can learn about what exactly energy justice is, because traditionally, I mean, it's not like people are knocking on our doors and telling us that the rate increase exists, because many people in our cohort had no idea that this was even happening. So that was a huge win for us.
Wow. I love just all the diversity of experiences and the big wins and the little wins and how energizing they are, right? Like when you have that little win, then you can rally people around to go the next mile. So the good things happen, and then there's the things that aren't so good, right? And so now I'd like to invite you to just name or share what's a barrier, what's a thing that brick wall that you keep running up against in your work that you wish we could just bust through or take away or wave a magic wand and send it all away. I mean, if we had a magic wand, we would just stop climate crisis, right? But if you had a small magic wand and you could just change something locally to make your work more successful, easier, whatever that might be, what's that one barrier you'd like to erase? We'll let Barbara go first this time.
That's a good question. There's I think one of the barriers is, especially in a place like Miami, there's always so much going on. And we are known as a very big tourist city, and so there's so much to entertain you and to keep you, not thinking about these issues that we kind of, if we don't see it, it's not happening. And so because, Miami is such a kind of a showy thing, a lot of the times we gloss over what's really happening, and with the people that live there. And so it takes a lot to get anything done. And so, for example, Miami-Dade County has 34 municipalities within. And so to be able to organize all of those, that's a big barrier, because we're all very different. Miami Beach is not the same as Hialeah, is not the same as Homestead, and these are all very localized, but these are all part of the same county. And so depending on who the commissioner is, depending on what their interest is, depending on how much money is coming in from tourism, and so there's a huge diverse level of engagement. And so I think that's a big challenge, is engaging people in Miami, in my community, because there's so many things going on. And so what I would say to kind of get over that is, make the environment a priority. And I don't think we've done that yet. So that would be the challenge.
Hello? Okay. I think for me, the biggest barrier that I wish would be able to be solved is the fact that young people can be so jaded when it comes to the climate space. A lot of young people have submitted themselves to be so frustrated that we're not moving faster, that we're not taking this seriously, that a lot of young people have resolved to just, okay, I'm going to enjoy my life for as long as I can because it doesn't feel like anything is moving. And I think that that's slowly changing. We saw in the 2022 election, or this year's midterm elections, that a lot of young people turned out to vote, and that helped in a variety of different races. And I think that people were expecting wider margins for a lot of politicians that might not support climate policy as much as we got. And I think that young people are starting to change their minds and starting to get more involved in the role that our leaders play in the climate movement and the role they can have in the climate movement. But I do still think that in order to get that lasting change, we need even more youth. We need even more young people who understand how important policy is to getting climate solutions, and more young people who are ready and energized to be a part of the solutions. And I think that my organization is working to show young people that they can be a part of these solutions, but it's still really tough for us because things like recruiting the youth that are energized, and not only recruiting the youth that are energized, but getting more youth from being in that jaded space to being energized to climate action, I think, is the bigger barrier. But my hope is that the more of the work that we're doing, the more that we can engage young people and understand their issues, that barrier will slowly shrink and more young people can be a part of the climate solutions that will lead us to climate solving this issue.
Wow, that's a really great point, Javen. I think I just saw an article a few days ago of them some states wanting to like make the voting age 21 now because they saw youth show up and show out, and now people fear that. So it's very interesting of you mentioning that, because clearly it seems like youth, we're a threat. So one of the things that I think has been a massive barrier for us at Girl Plus Environment is honestly getting people to invest in us and to invest in our work. Being a Black-led, woman-led, 25 and under led organization has been significantly hard for people to fund us and to fund our efforts, our on-the-ground efforts centered around environmental justice, health equity, and racial justice. And honestly, it shouldn't be that hard, but unfortunately what we have experienced in a lot of other climate justice who are BIPOC-led organizations that are very small have also experienced the fact that many people are not investing in us. And so it makes it very, very hard for us to keep up with not only the organizational capacity, but also the demand that our community is telling us. For example, the Protecting Our Energy project that we just wrapped up, our entire cohort said they're ready to do it again. They want to do it again. They're enthusiastic and they're fired up about it, but we don't have funding to do it again. And so that's very, very hard for us because our community is telling us that they want more, they love what we are doing, and they want to get engaged, but it's difficult when we don't have the funding to do that, and when we're seeing tons of bigger national organizations who are continuing to receive funding without actually investing in those smaller on the ground level organizations that are Black-led. And I think one of the things here at COP that we're talking about is around finance. And so if we're going to talk about finance, we need to talk about actually investing in Black and brown communities and Black-led organizations, because that's the only way that we can actually work to do the work that'll help to dismantle those environmental burdens and those climate burdens that we are continuously experiencing. So yeah, that's one of our really pressing barriers at the moment.
That's a real one. I know in the Twin Cities and in Minnesota in particular, after the murder of George Floyd and the uprising, lots of philanthropy started to, move their funds toward Black and brown-led organizations, but it's already starting to drift back to what was the normal nonprofit industrial complex. So there are joys and there are barriers. I'm really curious to know how each of you stays hopeful, right? What practices do you have to allow yourself as an individual to stay hopeful, and what is it that you dream will happen in the next 2 years in your local community and your own movement?
I guess I can kick us off. That's a big question. I feel like you're asking about my self-care. I don't want to be put on the spot about that. No. I think and to be completely transparent, it is significantly difficult to stay hopeful in this space, in this climate space. A lot of us are burned out. I mean, I'm 26, but I've been in this space for 7-8 years almost, and it's hard. But I think one of the things that keeps me motivated is the fact that I'm not doing it for myself. I'm doing it for people who look like me. I'm doing it for communities that I grew up in, and just thinking about my childhood, growing up in Detroit and knowing that there are still communities that suffer significantly from air pollution, from climate, from energy burden. It just, for me, that's what really keeps me pushing, because it just doesn't sit well with me, especially from a human rights aspect. I mean, all of this is human rights essentially. And so it's very difficult for me to just let it be, and just to not advocate for it. I mean, at this point, it's a part of my life. It's a part of who I am. And so I couldn't envision a world where I was not advocating for climate and environmental justice at this point. But I think what I envision the most is to be able to see a climate movement, an environmental movement that is led by Black and brown women, because essentially we are the ones disproportionately impacted. And so we should be at the forefront of these issues, because community knows what's best for community. And I think that is the most critical point when we're having these very high-level national conversations. Community needs to be in this room so that they can advocate for themselves, because that is the only way that we're going to move forward.
I definitely agree with you on that. What gives me hope, I have 2 kids, so they give me hope. My daughter just started high school this year, and my son is in 2nd grade. And so for me, the big thing, what pushes me is so that they have the same experience as I did. Growing up in South Florida, we have access to wonderful natural resources. We have the Everglades, we have Biscayne Bay, we have, coral reefs. We have all of this that is, I remember growing up and having these wonderful experiences. And what gives me hope is that they'll be able to have those same experiences, that it's not too late to change our course, and that I do see my children being more engaged and cautious and aware of what is going on, and really feeling that connection with nature. And I think that's a big thing that gives me hope, that I think we're reconnecting with nature. I think this whole movement is really causing us to think about how we live, work, play in the environment, and it's not just we take, but we have to give back. So that's what gives me hope, that I see that.
Yeah, I think to me, what keeps me hopeful is being around hopeful people and being around people who inspire me as well. I think for me, since Guam is a U.S. territory, I think I have like a really unique experience with being indigenous to the Pacific and being around other people who, like, being in the climate space. This is our lives that are on the line, Our islands are continually like being affected and like in danger of sea level rise. And so I think for me, coming back in Guam, seeing that there's so many people in the Pacific who, despite the challenges, are still hopeful themselves, gives me the energy to have hope, because we're all facing difficult situations, but if we're still working together and collaborating and having hope, that we can make the difference, I think that's what's helped me a lot, and I hope to bring that for other people who need it as well. That hope, because I think hope can be contagious, and I think that that positivity should just flow through everyone. I think another thing is that I've been in the climate space on the national level for about a year now, and at least the spaces that I've been in have been very not only hopeful, but focused on self-care, having values like rest is revolution, having values that center the fact that if you're not taking care of yourself, if you're not feeling good about the work that you're doing, then that's going to affect everyone. That's going to affect how we make a difference together. So I think that, like, having around hopeful people, having around people that can remind you the importance of self-care has kept me going in these spaces. And I think that I don't know. Even though these spaces are hard, it's great to be surrounded by people like you all who we can share this hope and bring it to climate action and ultimately going together towards climate solutions together.
Yes. Yes to all of that, right? Miriam Kaba, an author I follow, says that hope is a discipline and we have to practice it on a daily basis. And so I stay hopeful being around young people. I, every day, find some reason to believe that Generation Z is who's going to save all of us and the planet included. And that's why ACE is important, right? Because it's about building awareness and knowledge and being in community and taking action and persevering. We have a couple minutes left if there's any questions in the audience. No? So many? Yes. Yeah, we got to get a mic.
Thank you for the panel and really your inspiring work. I'm here representing a coalition of U.S. universities committed to going to net zero, and I'm wondering if you see roles that colleges and universities can play in supporting your efforts and connecting, because I agree that it's your generation that we're counting on to solve.
Yeah, that's a great question. I just recently, a month ago, was the only young person in like a panel of college professors who were advising organizations on where they feel climate solutions are, or where they feel their role is in climate solutions. And I reminded these professors and these government leaders that young people do want to be a part of these solutions. I think that providing young people with, providing your students with mentorships and opportunities that can facilitate them in this climate space. I think that a lot of times the academic system can feel so individualized and so focused on success that people don't have time. People feel like they have to focus on school and don't have time to focus on community or activism or climate work. And so I think that colleges around the country and around the world have the opportunity to facilitate young people feeling empowered to join these spaces by creating a healthy relationship between the students and school, which can then lead them to recognizing what's important to them. And a lot of times young people realize, young people with the time and the capacity will put their efforts into the spaces that matter to them. And a lot of young people are looking for the opportunities to get into the climate spaces that can be facilitated through mentorship and internship opportunities. And I think just making that process for going from the academic space into green jobs where they can make a difference and making that as streamlined as possible, because young people want to be in these spaces and young people want to make a difference. It's just more about access and providing access to those opportunities that will help them either join these spaces or cultivate their own solutions, I think, is where universities play a role in facilitating the next generation of climate leaders.
I also think for folks who work with young people or want to work with young people, stop treating them as tomorrow's leaders and see them as present, right now leaders, right? Don't give them token opportunities to be advisors. Put them on your boards. Put them in leadership positions and get out of the way. That's what I have to say.
Tell it, Susan. Yeah, I'll just quickly chime in. I appreciate you being in this space of being from academia and just being here. There's a great organization, Second Nature. I don't know if you've heard of, but yeah, okay. I was going to say, Okay, perfect. Yeah, I was on Second Nature's panel 2 weeks ago, all about climate and getting academia involved. And I think one of the biggest takeaways was that we should be investing in our students. We should be giving them the opportunities and the capacity to be able to do this amazing work. I mean, I think a lot about my undergraduate and my just academic experience, and unfortunately, all the opportunities that I was able to get in the climate space was because I sought them out. I didn't have that space in school, and it was very unfortunate, but I think that universities need to do a better job at providing those spaces, but also providing them to be paid spaces. I mean, we have done so much free work. We can't afford to do free work anymore, and I think that we have a lot of value and a lot of knowledge, and so it's critical that we are able to be in that space and that our voices are heard as well. So, thank you.
And just to jump in, they also need to lead by example. I think that a lot of universities and colleges need to take a look at their physical space as well. And I've seen that where, you go to a university, not going to name names, but, there's no recycling. They're still selling, plastic water bottles at every, at every stop. There's no infrastructure for like EV cars, for example. So there's a lot of stuff that I agree with everything with the students, but I also agree they need to lead by example, and it needs to be more integrated. I feel like sometimes if you're in the College of Education versus the College of Engineering versus, another thing, that it's not connected. And so the umbrella should be, our environment. So that would be.
Yeah, I really like leading by example. I've worked with a lot of young people who are working with their universities on fossil fuel divestment in their universities. And, I think that's one way that young people are trying to make a difference and make their voices heard in their university level, and that universities can step up and lead by example in that way. So I appreciate you mentioning that.
Okay. I think that's all the questions that we have time for. Thank you very much for joining our panel this morning. Thank you to the wonderful people I get to be in the space with this week. ACE, pay attention to it, build awareness, educate people, get them involved, let the people of the communities lead us out of this madness.